Before I begin, I just want to clarify that regarding the deceased person this video concerns, there will be some negative things mentioned about them, but my intention is not to speak ill of the dead or cause drama. My intention is only to approach this matter from a neutral perspective, meaning that while I don't wish to bash this person, I won't be putting them on a pedestal either. If that hurts anyone's feelings, I do apologize in advance for that. But at the same time, I just want to say if this kind of brutal honesty is going to be too much for you, then you may want to click away. Bet you guys thought you'd never hear from me again, but nevertheless, here I am. And the reason I've returned to make this hopefully not overly long video is because apparently another one of my angry reviewing contemporaries from back in the day has bitten the dust. On January 29th, 2023, it was reported that Marcus Sparacio, more commonly known here on YouTube as Armake21, died. This happened just one day shy of what would have been 2 full weeks right after he turned 40 years old. The cause of death is simply listed as medical complications, but even though that's not very clear, I did learn that he apparently suffered from epilepsy in the final years of his life, so I gather that the complications were related to that condition. Apparently, at the time of his death, he was working for the New York City Police Department, which is undoubtedly a very high stress affair. And no matter how much someone may love what they do for a living, there's only so much that can be done to mitigate the stress element in a job like that. And large quantities of stress can damage us as people and human beings after so long, especially in our physical health. And that said, I can only imagine that the amounts of stress from having a job like that only served to further impact his health, in addition to whatever else he may have been dealing with inside his body. At the same time, for his efforts to serve and protect his community, he deserves a great deal of honor and respect. With all of this being said, I felt the need to simply put out this PSA for any of my old followers that may still be around, along with anyone else who may remember Marcus, to discuss my own memories of him, my personal experiences with him, and also how he impacted what's come to be known as the Great Expectations 320 legacy. I realize I kind of found out about this late since Marcus has been deceased for what is now 3 weeks, and I'll expand on that in a bit. But if I'm being honest, the biggest reason I got the news when I did is because I recently went on YouTube to look up Silent Rob's video rant on the Super Bowl, which, as you guys know, is related because we just had Super Bowl 57, and I see that the most recent video on his channel is called Armake passed away, my thoughts, and inwardly I just gasped and said, oh my fucking god, you gotta be kidding me. And this was right before I was about to take my wife out for our Valentine's Day dinner, so talk about awkward timing. So yeah, I was not following Marcus on YouTube at the time this happened, and I had not been following him for many years, which I will also get to in a bit. But to say I was shaken up by this news would be a gross understatement. I can't believe how young this guy died. Now, I understand I went out of my way to pay tribute to Emmer Prevost, aka Helsing920, when he passed away, and he died at an even younger age than Marcus, 34 to be precise. However, it is a fact that Emmer was also significantly overweight, and again, not to speak ill of the dead, but people who are as overweight as Emmer was oftentimes have an abundance of health problems. So I guess Marcus's death was a little more surprising in that he didn't give off the appearance of having any major health difficulties going on. I guess it only goes to show you that unless perhaps you try to live in the same house as a certain person for whatever length of time, you never truly know what's going on with them behind the scenes. Also, I think it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge that in the last decade of this man's life, he was both married and divorced in a rather fleeting length of time, which I only found out because at completely random intervals I would pull up his Facebook profile once in a blue moon. Facebook stalking, basically. Come on, admit it. You all have done it. I have no idea what the circumstances were behind this cataclysmic event, but I have to say, I certainly found it interesting that apparently both Marcus and his ex wife seemed to move on after the divorce relatively quickly with two completely different people. Infidelity, abuse, I don't know what the catalyst was. I bring this up not to pass judgment on the man, but rather to further speculate what may or may not have taken years off of his life. I discovered Armake21 at the ripe young age of 13. At the time, I had just made an abrupt transition from homeschooling to private Christian school where I just struggled endlessly to relate to other kids and make friends. I was also grieving heavily for my maternal grandfather who had just recently passed away while we're on the subject of death. So emotionally, that was an incredibly rough patch of my life. I was a huge nerd, but nobody in that class was interested in the same shit I was, so I felt very isolated and alone. And besides watching movies and playing retro video games via computer emulation, I was looking for any sort of escape from that reality that I could find. All of a sudden, one day there in early 2007, I was just trying to play the NES game Ghostbusters on the emulator with a gamepad and just being endlessly baffled and confused as to how to beat that game. Eventually, this led to me searching on YouTube for videos about how to play the game. I ended up clicking on this video called Games That Suck Ghostbusters, and this bald dude in his 20s is just ranting and raving about all the flaws of the game, cursing wildly the whole time, and just telling everybody how bad it sucked. And I just about died laughing. I thought it was the funniest thing ever. And the reality is that if it wasn't for that fateful day in 2007 with my completely random discovery of Armake21's video there, my angry reviewing efforts probably never would have happened. It is doubtful that Great Expectations 320 would have existed otherwise. But wait, wasn't I also very influenced by James Rolfe, aka the Angry Video Game Nerd in my old work? True, but Marcus Sparacio, or Armake21, was special in the sense that he essentially proved that all you needed in order to be a YouTube game reviewer at that time was an emulator, a decent screen recorder, a decent video editor, and a $30 microphone. That was how it was done back in the day. We couldn't afford the high production values James had in his content, so the rest of us were basically forced to take what we had and run with it. Armake21 did it that way, Urinating Tree did it that way, WizWar100 did it that way, Silent Rob did it that way, Jedi1 did it that way, and I did it that way. Out of all the reviewers of that time, Armake21 was definitely my favorite and certainly the biggest influence and inspiration behind my own video making. However, these days I consider Great Expectations 320 to be both the best thing that ever happened to me and the worst thing that ever happened to me. The best thing because I met so many cool people doing those videos, cool people I probably never would have met otherwise. I also loved every second of making those videos. Say what you will about their extremely poor quality, but the point is, I was having a blast. But it was also the worst thing because sadly a bunch of shit for brained internet trolls found my content and decided they had to make it their life's mission to chase me off of what they considered their part of the internet. Why those people felt the need to be that cruel to a teenager, I will never understand. But that's another story. In Silent Rob's video where he was discussing this, he was saying that Marcus came off as rather aggressive and irritable most times he would try talking to him outside of YouTube, and Unfortunately, I have to say he pretty much hit the nail on the head with that one. Of course, when I found out Marcus had Skype, my 13-year-old self just had to try talking to him a couple of times. And from what I remember, those conversations were about 95% him talking and 5% me talking. At 24 and 25 years old, this dude was a conversational bulldozer in that you wouldn't be able to get one fucking word in edgewise because he felt this ridiculous need to share every thought that popped into his head with you, and good lord, there were many. Not only this, but if you happen to say one little thing the guy didn't like, you pretty much got chewed out immediately. Marcus was like that around the time he had somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 subscribers on his first YouTube channel, and this was back when you were considered to be climbing the YouTube ladder if you had 100 subscribers. Suffice to say, Marcus definitely allowed popularity and borderline internet celeb status to go to his head. And that leads me to believe that the ego he formed was ultimately his downfall because many people were eventually driven away from him because of that. Even though I didn't really have any mutual friends with Marcus, as someone who is as heavily involved in the YouTube game reviewing community as I was, I always heard whatever gossip and stories were being tossed around that section of the internet, and there were a lot of stories I heard about Marcus treating a lot of people like shit. Mind you, I'm not saying all of them were true, but I cannot believe they were all false either. And of course, if you look hard enough here on YouTube, you can find videos of audio recordings of Marcus in the midst of what were very obviously alcohol influenced tirades against random people that happened to get on his bad side. So he also had a drinking problem for a really long time. Somewhere between him making one bad decision after another and how he managed his content and the point where he let his drinking get out of hand, that was when I pretty much said, fuck this. I may have idolized the shit out of this guy as a young teen, but he's just not as cool as I thought he was, and I don't want to follow him anymore. I wish the story could be different, but there it is. I'm here to tell you guys the truth, not just whatever makes you feel good or what you guys want to hear. Eventually, after the shit hit the fan with his first two channels, he started another channel called The Waste O Time. And this is the channel he managed for the last 13 years of his life. Honestly, I did not care for the majority of the content on that channel, and it really made me kind of sad trying to watch it because, at least to me, those videos really made him seem like a shell of his former self. My heart wanted to see funny Armake21, not Marcus and his friends acting stupid together. But I just said to myself, if what he's doing isn't hurting anyone, and if it makes him happy to make these different kinds of videos instead of playing the Armake21 character, then by all means let him do it. However, the overall output of his content slowed down dramatically after the global pandemic of 2020 came into effect, and I hardly blame him personally because COVID fucked with almost every creative person and or entity that I'm aware of. Probably the most interesting videos I found from this channel of his were the incredibly lengthy part 1 and part 2 Q&A videos he posted in mid 2020, which simply consisted of audio of him talking against a black background. But honestly, I was proud of him for making these videos because he finally did what I had been wanting to see him do for years. I wanted to see him confront his past and admit to, or at least acknowledge, mistakes he made during those times. And the part of those two videos where he said to all his viewers, I'm sorry if I snapped like a twig at you. I didn't mean it. I was just a young, angry guy back then that thought he knew a whole lot more than he actually did. I was so fucking relieved when I heard him say that. I was, because let's just say that apology, not just to me, but also to several others, was long overdue. I do think it might have been nice for me to get one more chance to talk to the guy, but I'm just glad he finally took an opportunity to say that before his life ended. I don't think Marcus was a bad guy or anything, but let's just say that in the end he was a very private person, and a lot of times the lengths that he went to in order to achieve that probably made him more enemies than friends. I'm glad he finally apologized for all the misbehavior and bullshit, but if I'm being real, that apology was probably too little too late in the grand scheme of things, because this is the internet, guys. And while we're not supposed to take anything too seriously on here, let's face it, the internet never forgets anything. So there you guys have it. Initially, my feelings about his death were very mixed, and largely because of his tumultuous past. But even though I was no longer a fan of Marcus's in the last 13 years of his life, I really do think it sucks that he's no longer with us. As a Christian, I have no idea about the state of his eternal soul. In the brief times I spoke with him personally, he kind of sounded like an atheist when the subject of my faith was brought up. But I do hope he had a last minute repentance or something. I would love to see and talk with him again the day I get to heaven. But only God knows the answer to that one. For anyone who might be wondering about me and who either lost track of me years ago and or may be unfamiliar with my channel history, I'm going to discuss those things in a separate video, so if that is any information that you need, I will most likely post that video soon after this one, so just check that out at your own convenience, or not, it's your choice. So basically, all the rest of what I have to say for this video is just rest in peace, Marcus Sparacio. Thank you for doing your part to serve and protect the NYC community. I do wish you hadn't left such a trail of bitterness and hurt feelings behind you, but thank you for the hours of entertainment you provided me as a young teen. That part of my life will never be forgotten, and I extend all my love to his family and friends too. Peace.